Going to begin the last panel of this symposium, which is on social activism and the transformation of society. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to the moderator, Tanae Harris.
Greetings and good evening.
Good evening.
Greetings and good evening.
Good evening.
All right, my name is Tanae Harris. I am one of the people who have helped Dr. Montero put this conference together. I'd like to introduce our panelists. First, we have Mama Pam Africa. She is what we know of as the Minister of Confrontation, and she wears it well. In 1978, the Philadelphia Police Department had a direct attack on her family, who was the Move. And in 1981, they also dropped a bomb on her family. 1985, they dropped a bomb on her family, killing 11 men, women, and children. She is also a mother, a grandmother, and a great-grandmother. She said she likes to wear her titles, so I try to give them all to her. And she is definitely very active in going to free Mumia Abu-Jamal. We also have Mr. Ewuare Osayande. He is a political activist, award-winning poet, also an author. Two of his books are Who's America? And also Misogyny in the MC, Race, Sex, and Hip Hop. And he is also a native of Philadelphia. And then we have the great and honorable Elijah Muhammad. We have Dr. Max Stanford, also known as Dr. Muhammad Ahmed. He is one of the founders of Revolutionary Action Movement. He is also a professor here in the Department of African American Studies at Temple University. And we will first start off with Mama Pam Africa.
Okay, being that I am the Minister of Confrontation for the MOVE organization, I'd like to use my power and say I will go last. Oh, and the glasses, I'm not trying to be cool. It's allergies. My eyes are tearing, so don't let everybody say, oh, Pam running around trying to be cool tonight. It's an allergy thing.
For those of us who've been organizing in Philly for however long it's been, knows that when Sister Pam speaks, we just listen. And so it's an honor to be here tonight to share with you and engage with you in what has been a most remarkable time together as we reflect on the life, the legacy of our dear brother, Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois. I just want to make some comments and then conclude with a poem. We are dealing here at a very critical moment. We all achieved the history that we took place in 2008, and with all of our conversation about Obama and what he represents, I still believe there are a few conversations we've yet to have. So I want to engage an aspect of this question. In 2008, when he was elected, Obama would not have been the president were it not for the record turnout that black folks gave him. I think there's a big lesson there that we have failed to appreciate as a community. I want to open up by quoting Brother Malcolm X. This is from his speech, The Ballot or the Bullet. And in this speech, of course, what we know is that this was a point of transition for Brother Malcolm. He had recently announced his movement from the Nation of Islam and was seeking to create or be a part of the development of what would become a united front. In this speech, he lays out an analysis of the Democratic Party that I feel is still relevant to our time. The quote I'm going to share with you is as follows. He says, the Democrats have been, and think about this in terms of where we are today. The Democrats have been in Washington, D.C. only because of the Negro vote. They've been down there 4 years, and all other legislation they've wanted to bring up, they've brought up and gotten it out the way. And now they bring up you. And now they bring up you. You put them first, they put you last, because you're a chump, a political chump, end quote. We have a president in Barack Obama who believes that he can take our vote as African Americans as the single critical voting bloc responsible for him being in office. Now everybody talked about, you know, all the white folks who showed out in, I guess it was Iowa in the primary season, and how unprecedented that was. I'm not taking anything away from that. But what we do know is that when it came time for the presidential election itself, when it was Obama versus McCain, that the white turnout actually dropped an entire percentage point from the previous presidential election. And if you recall, that presidential election between Bush and Kerry was also at that time a record turnout for the American population. So what we saw was a drop in turnout on the part of the white collective vote. And so it was necessary, when you go back and look at the actual electoral map, there were certain states Obama had to win. And if you calculate the number of black votes in those states like Pennsylvania, here in Pennsylvania, states like Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, places that historically have not just voted for the white person, but have voted Republican. It was our vote that made the critical turn of events into the history it would become. Malcolm is teaching us here in The Ballot or the Bullet, where he says that we are the defining factor. The black vote is the defining factor when it comes to the election of presidents. And this is 40 years ago now we're talking about. We are missing a very critical aspect of our political power. Because what has happened over the last 4 years is that we've become silent as a community of people. We've sat back and defended Obama at whatever cost. Costs that, in all truth, we cannot afford. When we look at an unemployment rate that has taken hold of the entire nation. Now many people are saying, well, you know, unemployment rate's kind of leveling out. What we know in the black community is that the unemployment rate continues to increase. Whatever is going on across the country with regard to other folks, the economic condition of our community has been crippled. We have some internal contradictions that we have to consider. And I would argue that in terms of the question of activism, what we ought to be doing before we can do anything constructive, beneficial for our community, we're going to first have to wrestle with these difficult questions that have nothing really to do with either Obama or the Democratic Party, or even to a large degree white people in general. Dr. Du Bois is known for his concept called the talented tenth. Many of us who went to school may have heard about Du Bois's concept of the talented tenth. Many of us may even have read about it. But what most of us, if not all of us, did not do, or did not have the opportunity to do, is to learn that Du Bois himself would come to memorialize that very concept. In other words, he gave it up. He lost faith in it himself. And our failure to appreciate that finds us in a particular predicament right now. I'm going to read a quote from him where he actually speaks to this memorialization of the talented 10th. He says, "When I came out of college into the world of work, I realized it was quite possible that my plan of training a talented 10th might put in control and power a group of selfish, self-indulgent, well-to-do men whose basic interest in solving the Negro problem was personal freedom, and unhampered enjoyment and use of the world, without any real care, or certainly no arousing care, as to what would become of the mass of American Negroes, or the mass of any people. The talented 10th, my talented 10th," he says, "I could see might result in a sort of interracial free-for-all, with the devil taking the hindmost and the foremost taking anything they could lay their hands on." End quote. That's Dr. Du Bois. For Dr. Du Bois, the talented 10th would become a group of people whose greatest talent was being able to deceive the masses of black folks as to our economic best interests. You see, we have a black elite today that has been raised up by the very system who use their blackness as masquerade to disguise their class-based intentions. You can call them sellouts, you can call them Uncle Toms, but whatever you call them, what they in fact are a petty bourgeoisie who have been placed in power by the very capitalist system that is founded upon our people's oppression and exploitation, the very system that was born from the bowels of slavery. These folk now sit atop all institutions that hold sway in our community, political, religious, and cultural. They are in fact cultural hustlers, swindlers, petty bourgeois peddlers who push an ideology of capitalism disguised as black uplift. They call it prosperity gospel. They call it bootstrap economics. They call it the bling bling. They are in fact empowered by a white corporate elite who through them are able to achieve what they themselves could never do. Politically, we have the best example right here in Philadelphia with our very own Mayor Nutter. You said it right.
That's right.
In a recent speech not too long ago, when our city was up in arms over the actions of some of our young folk, Michael Nutter took it upon himself to show up at a black church in a West Philadelphia neighborhood he once lived in to say and call our youth all manner of names, everything essentially but children of God. Called them hooligans, buttheads. He even called them crazy. But what he failed to acknowledge was his crazy policies that have in fact fostered the level of chaos the black youth in this city are currently experiencing. Mayor Nutter came into office with a cultural policy of literally closing up community centers at a time when black youth had very little opportunity and outlet. He would then move on to attempt to close many libraries under the name of, we got to do something about the economic crisis. Most recently, he's responsible for spearheading this effort to lock up our public schools on the weekends, at a time when many nonprofit organizations that work with our youth make use of them for athletics and other forms of recreation. This is the man who prided himself on his stop and frisk policy, a policy that has been vilified in New York City. A man who himself has never put together his first term in office or his second term as yet a viable economic jobs program targeting the very youth he vilifies. Rather, what he has done is he's opened up the door to the criminal industrial complex to come in and lock up our young folks. Matter of fact, in the West Philadelphia neighborhood where I live, they are building a brand new juvenile hall facility. Nutter's policies and presentation are the general position of a black political elite who blame their own people as they provide a free corporate pass to a corporate sector that exploits us and imprisons our children. When we talk about the black church, we can levy this criticism here as well. We're talking about a mega church that defines itself based on this gospel of prosperity. This idea that if you are poor, it's something that you're not doing right. You must not be praying well enough or hard enough or praising God enough. You're certainly not coming to church tithing enough. And what is most remarkable for me is the fact that even in this current economic moment, where people are hurting, suffering, where anybody who has a semblance of education understands and appreciates Wall Street's impact on the availability of jobs and opportunity across this country. Yet and still, we have black ministers who every Sunday stand up in their pulpits and preach a gospel that demonizes the poor, makes poverty a sin. And we accept this. You can't pray yourself out of poverty, and you certainly can't praise yourself out of poverty. Yet as a community people, we've been so spooked that so many of us will still give over our meager savings to enrich the minister, all the while wondering how we're going to keep our lights on at night. Poverty is the result of politics. Poverty is the consequence of capitalism as a system. And finally, we come to the question of culture. Hip-hop culture is not just the predominant mode of expression of black youth. It has become the dominant expression of not just America, but young people throughout the world. Yet there is a dynamic that we need to take concern to. The hip-hop that we hear coming out of places like Palestine, Cuba, Brazil, even parts of Southeast Asia, even parts of Africa are not similar to the sounds of hip-hop that we hear coming out of our own communities in this country. In this country, what we call hip-hop culture have been able to achieve what all the years of Sambo and Step and Fetch It could not achieve. The creation of a generation of young people who prize ignorance over education, materialism over integrity, self-hatred and self-indulgence over self-love and community. But we need to understand something a bit more than just that. Is how the system has functioned to get our young people to turn on themselves and each other. The problem is that we have equated what the corporate sector has presented to us as hip-hop as black. That's our fundamental problem. 20 years ago, when we were fighting this battle, and I would be on panels with academics who would try to make the argument that hip-hop is a tool of empowerment, I'm saying, hold on, how can a community of youth be empowered by a culture they don't control? That's not the lesson that we get out of the black arts movement. Baraka and Sonia Sanchez and Haki and the others, they were struggling against the forces of the publishing industry. They weren't trying to get up in it. They published their work themselves. They weren't trying to get down with Warner Brothers. But now we have a culture that is wholly complicit in the corporate sector, wholly embraced. And now our confusion is as a result. It is run on the backs of young black men who have embraced an idea of manhood that is anything but manly. that is anything but powerful. Black feminist Bell Hooks makes it plain when she says that when young black males labor in the plantations of misogyny and sexism and produce gangster rap, white supremacist capitalist patriarchy approves the violence and materially rewards them. Far from being an expression of their manhood, it is an expression of their own subjugation and humiliation by more powerful, less visible forces of patriarchal gangsterism. They give voice to the brutal, raw anger and rage against women that is taboo for so-called civilized men to speak. The tragedy for so many young black males is that they have been so easily duped by a vision of manhood that can only lead to their destruction. And even in the wake of the murders of Tupac, of Biggie, and many-fold other young black men involved in hip-hop culture, yet and still we have yet to question our allegiance to this idea of manhood that is wholly destructive to not just black women, but ourselves as men. We got work to do. Rush, Def Jam, Bad Boy, Death Row, all these so-called rap labels that proclaim themselves to be independent are merely subjects of a white corporate recording conglomerate, which is now controlled by mere 4 companies: Universal, Warner, Sony, and EMI, who are in constant struggle for a greater share of black music. What we have developed, people, and what we need to understand is what is called a comprador class. The comprador is that entity that sells back to its own people a product that is devised by their people's oppressor. And that's what we have here in what we are calling hip-hop culture. Never before in the history of our people have we raised a generation who defend calling themselves niggas. We have never developed that before. That's where we are now. The question becomes, whose black are we trying to run with? What will be the defining understanding of what it means to be black in the 21st century? Du Bois placed the problem of the color line a whole century ago. And somewhere along the way, we've lost our way. And we now stand up and allow for, in the name of, well, these are our young folks, we got to let them work it out. Jay-Z is older than me. And you see my gray hair, so you know I'm not a young person. Russell Simmons is past 50 years old. These are not young people. So we need to get out of that space and understand that we're talking about a corporate sector that has an investment in. Because what are they able to do now? What are they able to do now? What has BET become but a show and tell for the criminalization of black youth? Where you have black rappers on their way to the prison giving reality TV shows, video diaries on their way to being locked up. And that's supposed to be some kind of expression of their manhood. I'm going to wrap it up. But we have to understand this. You see, this is what Malcolm said. Malcolm said in 1964, he said, this system in this country cannot produce freedom for an Afro-American. It is impossible for this system, this economic system, this political system, this social system, this system, period. It's impossible for this system as it stands right now to produce freedom for black people in this country, end quote. So the question becomes, which black are we riding with? Are we down with Russell Simmons' black, who praises capitalism, has a whole generation of black youth dancing to a beat that is determined by corporate interest that is based on our exploitation? Capitalism can never provide full employment for black people. It can't. If it were to do that, it would no longer be capitalism. It might be called socialism, I don't know. But the system functions. It needs poverty to function. so that it can exploit wages, exploit people's labor. We have to wake up. Either we're down with the backward blackness of Jay-Z, Kanye West, and Uncle Russ, or the blackness of Malcolm X. You can't have it both ways, my brothers. You can't say you down with Brother Malcolm and at the same time get down with Jay-Z. It's a contradiction. Our community can't move forward in that space. Either we down with the backward blackness of Nicki Minaj, Lil Kim, Beyonce, or the blackness of sisters like Sonia Sanchez, June Jordan, Asada Shakur. We can't have it both ways. We have to cut the contradictions and become organized. We have to recognize the betrayal for what it is and call it accordingly. We got to raise the stakes, recognize the sellout as an individual or an entity that has placed class interest above the interest of the best interest of black people. Or in the words of Amilcar Cabral, who says, in order not to betray these objectives, the petty bourgeoisie has only one choice: to strengthen its revolutionary consciousness, to reject the temptations of becoming more bourgeois. That's where we are, see? That's the logic of capitalism. Wants us to believe that if we just work harder, save a little bit more money, and we too can get that Benz that we see in the hip-hop video, that we too can make it rain. They want us to believe the lie and to embrace our own exploitation. Cabral challenges that and says we have to commit class suicide. We have to give up those aspirations and join ranks with the workers, the people who know that I'm never going to make $1 million working here, but I work here because I have to. I work here because I got a family to take care of. I work here because this is all the system has provided for me, and I'm not satisfied with that. That's the attitude we need right now. Because if we have that attitude, we will not only join ranks with black workers in this country, we would be joining ranks with workers all over the world who are reeling right now under an imperialism that has our face at the head. We got work to do. We got work to do. We need a revolutionary consciousness, not based on how bad you sound, how much you can cuss out the white man. We need a revolutionary consciousness that is based on how tough your analysis is of our present moment in relationship to the rest of the world. We need a new black, a true black. Black, black, so black, it's black as the blues black. We so confused, been so abused, we don't even know ourselves no more black. Our minds locked in the television sets where black is typecast in stereo, got us hallucinating in horizontal lines of manufactured ignorance, seizures of consciousness. Mass-marketed madness is black more than a color, more than a style, more than a shiny label stuck on the back of the latest ish, a whitewashed wish. What does it mean to be black? Was it the DJ or the DA that turned the tables on us, left us spinning? Are we more than shiny grills, MC Sambos grinning with cavities in their craniums black? Platinum rims, riffing in Timbs, and we think we hot as hell, yet fail to see that we the ones getting burnt at the stake, on the take, repping a blackness that's fake, that's been raped, that's born from the minds of billionaire bigots, trying to make $1 out of 50 cents. Tell me, does it mean to be black? Pimpin' hoes black, hustler black, rat-a-tat-tat, a gangster black, gotcha. Who shot you black, but it's us dying black. How black is that? Is we free black? We walk around with the word nigga tattooed in the backside of our minds. Is we free? Who defines us as we is not, knowing the truth? We become the proof. A slave does not need chains. Who in their right mind will want to name themselves after an epithet spit from the lips of those that enslaved your great-grandmama's mama? Not recognize that we sick. we sick. Tuskegee experiments, the remix. Put syphilis on our souls, burnt the sight out of our cipher. Is we free black? See, the auction block is where we live. Our very selves traded still, sold to the highest bidder. Can't get a job when ain't no jobs to get got, so we stuck picking cotton out of empty lots. This is what it means to be black. The ends justify the means, black. You sure about that? Because I'm almost certain that's what the slave trader told the missionary way back in the day, black. How it is we got this way. Jim Crow knows, but do you? What does it mean to be black? Past the skin down to the soul, how to get back what they stole, black, when we still being robbed. What can make us whole? We need a new black. Black to the future, black, a radical, black, a resistance, black, a fighting back, black, a revolutionary black. We need revolutionaries, black. Who will be black? Black is Jesus Christ coming back and save ourselves, black. See yourself, black. Know yourself, black. Love yourself, black. Because the truth will set us free, black.